Brace yourselves!
This is not going to be an everything wrong with Warhammer in 7 minutes video, although that might be kind of fun to do someday. These are the 3 biggest problems I see plaguing the game that I wish CA would give greater attention to fixing. Not literally everything, just the 3 most important. There are other things I thought about including in this list: bad AI, missing elements of grand strategy, considering this is supposed to be a grand strategy game, dumbed down features compared to previous Total War titles, and so on. I'm not including them because even though they're not great, I don't consider them one of the top 3 problems. I know many of you will disagree with that statement and others I make in this video, so to be clear, all this is only my opinion, although I will do my best to justify all my conclusions. But I do want this to be just a starting point for discussion, so please do express your own thoughts and opinions in the comments. I'll try to be as succinct as possible while still going into enough detail to show how I came up with this list. But obviously, this kind of video is not going to appeal to everyone, so if you're not interested in hearing me ramble on about nuance and philosophy of this game and gaming in general, I'll try to save you some time right now. Thanks for checking in, and I hope to catch you in another video. Anyway, let's get into it. These are broad issues, not specific things like individual bugs. In other words, I'm not listing the gate bug and siege battle pathfinding as separate issues. Instead, they're grouped together along with other bugs and design problems into one of the items on this list. Speaking of which, number 3, bugs and design problems sap enjoyment from battles. And I know a lot of you are probably already thinking, why isn't this number 1? Hopefully my explanation will make sense. It's certainly top 3 though. Anyway, what makes Total War unique and so addictive is the blend of strategy and tactics. And by and large, they, meaning CA, nailed the strategy. There are some exceptions to that, but by and large, they nailed the strategy. But it's really important that both strategy and tactics be good, meaning both campaign and battles have to be good. And although there are definitely many things to enjoy about tactics, and of course what I mean here is manually fighting those battles, there's also vast room for improvement, to put it generously. I want to emphasize the last point. There are many things to enjoy about battles, which often get lost in the din of legitimate complaints, and this is why I don't list this as the number 1 problem. To this day, I still fight almost all my battles manually because not doing so turns this game into just a strategy game, which is in essence only half a game. And no matter how engaging the strategy is, it gets pretty boring on its own eventually. You need battles to be equally engaging, and this is where the aforementioned issues like poor battle maps, frustrating pathfinding, units ignoring orders, missile unit line of sight, the gate bug, the inability to run down enemy units, and so on, all come to the forefront. To summarize, strategy is fun, but the battles right now, without some fixes, just leave you feeling like it's all very suboptimal. Number 2, the game has wasted opportunity factions. Let me explain what I mean. First of all, some power creep is to be expected, especially after a game that is as mature as this one and with so many DLCs coming out. And I don't want to conflate what I'm talking about here with balance, because as I've said before in other videos, I don't expect every faction in Legendary Lord to be perfectly balanced. In fact, I'm glad they're not. Sometimes I want more of a challenge. Sometimes I want unique situations that are particularly difficult to overcome that leave you with a greater sense of accomplishment. And other times I might want a more relaxing, more of a, free-flowing sandbox experience. But anyway, I don't expect them all to be perfectly balanced, but I do expect them all to be challenging. And this is where the biggest part of the problem lies. Omens of Destruction was particularly notorious for this, but it's not the only culprit. There's almost no way to lose some campaigns, particularly something like the Changeling. Once you understand his mechanics, there's almost no way to lose his campaign. Skulltaker and Arball just trivialize content with their incredibly overpowered mechanics. I'm still working my way through the changes introduced in Tides of Torment, but one can already see that some factions just feel like they have easy mode buttons compared to others. Again, some unbalance is to be expected. Unbalance, imbalance, some imbalance is to be expected. But some of these are so obvious that they should have been caught in the design stage. How they got through design, development, testing, and quality assurance all the way to production is a very, very disappointing head-scratcher. And I haven't even gotten to the Legendary Lord that should be the signature campaign of Warhammer 3, considering all the trouble the developers went through to create a really good tutorial campaign and get the player invested in the character of Yuri Barkov. The Godslayer, and no, I'm not going to use his nickname because I hate it. Anyway, the Godslayer campaign should be the natural culmination of the story of Yuri and Urson and Be'lakor, and it's just not. There's an amazing mod by Moortrow that vastly improves this campaign, but come on, CA, invest a little effort into making this a unique and flavorful campaign worth playing. This is the Arthas of Warhammer 3. It should be epic, not sub-free LC level. To summarize, even when we allow some power creep and imbalance between Legendary Lords and factions, that still leaves some campaigns that stand out as not very fun to play for one reason or another. Either they're too powerful, they're too easy, or they're just substandard. I call them wasted opportunity factions because the potential is there for them to be really fun, but it's like CA doesn't care enough to address these flaws. All right, and that leads us up to the number one problem from my perspective. We are missing mid-game and late-game challenge. Far too often, I find myself starting a campaign, thinking about my strategy, looking over what the faction has to offer, getting excited by some really compelling mechanic to unlock or fun-looking units to recruit, and then realizing that by the time I get to them, my campaign will already be in the going through the motions stage where it's a foregone conclusion that I know I'm going to win. What I mean by that is that in most cases, the only truly challenging part of the campaign is the early game. Most of your early games are quite engaging, and a lot of times it's really fun to overcome those first couple of enemies and the first crisis that you're facing. But then once you overcome that, the game just kind of loses a lot. The end-game crises that were introduced a while back were not, at least for me, a good way to make the later stages of the game more compelling. They were instead a lazy way to introduce arbitrary difficulty. I like campaigns that have organic difficulty where as you're getting stronger, there are other factions that are getting stronger at the same time. And so there's always this continuous difficulty provided by your opponents. And they kind of, each campaign kind of takes on its own personality based on not only how you're doing, but on how the other factions are doing. And the in-game crises don't provide that at all. Anyway, I do think CA was onto something with their introduction of game-changing special unusual locations. These are creative ways to introduce and build up challenge throughout a campaign that doesn't involve just spawning waves of 20 stack enemies. They're creative and flavorful and can be impactful, and my only real criticisms of them are that they can spawn a little too early in a campaign. I think they'd be better introduced in the mid and late game when the game is missing any other real challenge. And that also, it's a bit too simple to get rid of them just by spending a sum of gold. Have your campaign dramatically impacted, taken in a thematic direction that you didn't plan on, and possibly completely derailed, or click here to spend 5,000 gold to make it go away, is not the best way to handle these. I think they could do more with this mechanic, and I'd be curious what all of you think. Anyway, back to the idea of missing mid and late game challenge. This is what makes a lot of players get bored with the game and just start auto-resolving battles to speed through content. And let me tell you, speeding through content, not just for this game, but for all kinds of games, speeding through content is a great way to get tired of it way before it's time. Fixing this problem, by the way, the missing and late game challenge, fixing that problem, or at least delaying it, has really been the main objective of the campaigns and a lot of the mod discussions that I do on this channel. I know at least some of you agree with me, but again, I'd like to hear differing thoughts on this topic and all of the topics that I covered in this video. So let's make this a launching pad for further discussion. Who knows, maybe someone from CA is listening and our discussion can filter into game design in the future. We can only hope. Anyway, on that note, I'm looking forward to the feedback. As always, all opinions are welcome as long as they're voiced respectfully. Also, if you've made it this far, why not consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribing? It really does help me out and it helps other people to find my channel and these videos. But in any case, with all that said, thanks so much for watching and I'll catch you in the next video.